Hello and welcome to another Rightly Witterings with me, Michael Jex, the tea drinking author, with, just for a change, a cup of tea. Cheers. I think I'm about to be attacked. Never mind. So, what am I talking about today? I think it's a two-part video today. Now, as you will know, some little while ago, I procured a Paper Republic A6 Pocket notebook, and it has been with me every single day since. Now, the thing about this is, it's a simple leather folder, exactly the same sort of concept as a Midori Traveller's notebook. So it's elastic strings inside and an elastic closure just to keep it all together. Now, I've spoken about it before. I absolutely love it. I really like the paper, which is fantastic. It's the same quality as William Hanna paper to my mind. It takes fountain pen writing really well. And the delightful thing is, it's quite fat. As you can see, a standard notebook in comparison is less than half the thickness. Now, part of that, of course, is that other notebooks don't have such high quality paper. I'm not absolutely certain what the weight is of the paper in a Paper Republic notebook. I think it's somewhere in the region of 120 potentially. Yeah, I think it must be 120 GSM. Now, I've modified my one in two ways. I've acquired the Paper Republic card and wallet, card and money holder they call it. Now, I was a bit wary about this because it's made of card. Now, if you're like me and you've used a number of notebooks and other items, then you do get to sort of realise that there's a difficulty with card in your pocket all the time. It wears out. It wears out really moderately quickly. This doesn't seem to be. This seems to be much more robust. No idea what the weight is. It must be about 300 GSM at least, but it seems to be incredibly robust. So I look forward to seeing how that lasts. Now, one thing that I have done is I've added two bookmarks. You can see them, little strings dangling down here. These little strings are just perfectly simply looped over the elastic inside. So they just dangle, really. There's no weight on them or anything to keep them in place, but they seem to work extremely well. They're very effective. Now, I have got this plain paper notebook, which has finer paper than the rest. I think it's probably about 90 GSM, a little bit thicker than ordinary writing paper. But the thing that gets me is it's wonderful for sketching. So, as you all know, I have this year decided that I will be doing a sketch a day. There's my daughter's little dog, a Belgian Malinois, curled up on my chair. There's one of my little dogs, Bernese mountain dog, curled up in her bed. There's a picture of two of my friends, Morris dancers, when we were down at Winkley last year. But as well as all that, this paper seems to be really quite capable of taking watercolours. Not a huge amount of water, but it's perfectly acceptable for a sketchbook. So I am very impressed indeed with this paper. But there's one thing that I do like, is my little stamp, which is the sign of my library, my office, my workspace. This is my office, this is my workspace. And something I would quite like to do, now Paper Republic will, if you ask, emboss your initials or your name at the bottom front of their notebooks. But I've mentioned this before, a good friend of mine has got one of these jolly clever and I'm trying to think what they're called. Not inkjet, but plastic jet printer. What do you call them? They're electronic devices that squirt out fine filaments of plastic and you can make things from them. I know the Ukrainians are using these devices to manufacture a lot of their drones. Well, this is a little stamp that my friend made for me so that I can stick it and press the leather here to create that same logo, the Michael Jex logo. That really appeals to me. There you go, so it'll look like that in the end. Trouble is, of course, it does mean spoiling the pristine look of this nice natural leather cover. So I've waited, I've thought, I've considered, I've panicked slightly about the thought of damaging this wonderful little notebook. But I think it is now time to get on with this. Having said that, of course, I've just thrown the stamp on the floor. There we go. Right. So, how do you actually do it? Now, I have made leather things before. Made quite a few leather things before. Can I see where any of them are right this minute? No, of course not. That would imply that I'd actually planned carefully what I was going to be talking about today, and I haven't. But take it from me, I've made other things out of leather before now. And the main thing you have to do, if you want to emboss something like this, what you can do is just use a very powerful stamping machine which will, just by sheer weight and force, emboss what you want onto the leather. That, I think, is how Paper Republic do it, either when they do the initials or when they put their own little logo at the bottom there. Now, for me, with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to soak this leather for several hours, and then when it is soaked, I'll put that in the right place, comme ça, and then I'll have to put a heavy weight on top of it so that it will press into the leather really strongly and form the pattern that I want. Now, this is the reason why I haven't done anything yet, because I don't know how this leather is going to react to being soaked. Now, all of the other times I've done it, oh, I've just realised, here's something I made earlier. So this is a waterproof beer tankard. It's waterproof because I soaked the leather to curl it round, and then after I'd finished forming it, I filled it with beeswax. You can see that the beeswax has dribbled around here, and I'm very pleased with the result. It is a perfectly functional beer tankard. Of course, now I'm diabetic, I can't have beer very often, but when I can, that's the sort of thing I'll use. Another thing I have made in the past is a larger sized drinks bottle. This is my medieval pottle that I made many, many moons ago, which is desperately dirty and really does need a damn good polish. But this is made of really thick, heavy-duty leather. You can see how thick it is there. It's about, I'd say the leather itself is 1/4 inch thick. It's the sort of leather that you use to make shoe soles. And the way I made this was, I soaked the leather, stitched it up first of all, then I soaked it in water for quite a long time, filled it full of, I think it was oatmeal, and rammed the oatmeal in. That's how I got this lovely rounded shape. I would have liked it to have been a bit more rounded, but the fact is this leather is so solid that it was impossible to do that. And then while it was wet, I formed a Templar cross because I thought that would be a nice pattern to go with my books. And then when it dried out, I had to press that shape, that pattern into it really quite firmly, just running round with what they call a bone, which is a piece of plastic that's really quite rigid and you can press out any shape you want. So I ran around and put that pattern into it, and when it dried out, the pattern remained. And then as the final stage, I put it in the oven at a very low temperature and gradually dried it out. And as it dried, it formed this really solid, hard shape. And it's very successful. So there you go. You see, that's what I know I can do. The only thing is, I'm a little bit nervous about how this leather is going to react. Now, in the past, I have had accidents when I've been out and about. As an example, my Midori Traveller's Notebook once came with me to a Morris dancing practice, and I left it behind by accident in my tent while we were out practicing. And that day we had the worst storm I've ever experienced when I've been Morris dancing. And what happened was the tent blew away. And this was inside my tent, so this was left exposed to the elements for about 8 hours of solid rain, more or less sitting in a puddle. I was astonished when I got back to discover that the whole of the leather had a tide mark, and that lasted for about 2 years. But that's gone. And you can still see other marks. I mean, it's got various marks here. That's a bit of a tide mark up there, which I don't know where that comes from. But this lovely old leather pocket book, notebook thing, has really been through the wars. It's about 20 years old now, I think. I must have had it for about 20 years. And it used to be in my pocket all the time. But as I've said before, the main thing is the Paper Republic notebook is just that bit more convenient. And I do like the fact that it takes standard A6 notepads. So I can fit a standard A6 notebook into it. With the Midori Traveller's Notebook series, the passport size is not a standard size, so you can't just shove anything you want inside it, which is a bit sad. So this is a two-parter because I will hopefully be able to show you in a week's time how this looks. I can't do it now because first I have to soak it, then I have to press it, and then I have to let it dry out. That whole process is going to be about 24 to 48 hours. And I'm not looking forward to it because it means I won't have this in my pocket for all that time. But I think it has got to be done. It's got to be experimented with. I have played with leather before, as I say. So hopefully this will not be a disaster. Got to say one other thing, which is this stuff. I bought this last year at some point. It is a glittery ink. You can see where the ink's glitter has all deposited itself on the base there. This ink I put into my Conway Stewart Drake before Christmas, and it was the ink that I used to sign all my Christmas cards. I say all my Christmas cards, it works out at about, how many were there? I think there was about 150 odd that we sent out this year. So I've used up that much ink. And I have to say, I've always been slightly nervous about putting glittery ink in pens, because if the particles are not fine enough, they could clog your nib and feed and really make a mess of your pen. And I don't want this pen spoiled. But this ink is diamine, and it's also an exclusive with Cult pens. They still have some. And I have to say, it's one of the most beautiful inks I've ever used. It flows superbly. Even now, 2 months after I filled this pen, because I don't use this pen very often, it still functions without any sort of difficulty. It's not clogged. It's not a slow starter or anything. It's absolutely fine. And it looks stunning on the page, or on the birthday card or Christmas card. He says, having just signed a brother's birthday card last week. It's just wonderful ink. If you haven't tried it, it's diamine and it's from Cult Pens, and it's really not very expensive. Platinum Jubilee. It was actually made, I think, for the Queen's Jubilee some years ago, but they still have some in stock. Thoroughly recommend it. If you haven't tried it, get yourself a bottle quick before they run out. And that, for now, is it. I'm now going to go soak a lump of leather, hopefully not completely ruin it, and in a week's time you should be able to see how it's all going. And I think that's about it for now. If this is interesting and you like it, do please hit the subscribe and like it and hit the bell. And if you want to buy me a coffee, you can do that. Someone last week, a couple of you did very kindly send me some buy me a coffee tokens. If anybody's interested, I'm trying to save up to get a new microphone so that I can function with this iPhone a little bit more efficiently, not just in the office, but also when I'm out and about. So I want to get a new microphone that'll be clip-on, remote from here, and which will also allow me to have a windsock over the top so that when it's blowy, because it often is blowy down here, then I can hopefully walk around, talk, and it'll make for slightly more interesting videos. So if you're interested in helping with that, do please get in touch either with buy me a coffee or something similar. But for now, that's your lot. Here's a couple of dogs behaving stupidly, and thanks a lot for watching. Speak to you in a week's time, hopefully with a new version Paper Republic notebook. Take care. Speak to you soon. Cheers.